Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Wednesday morning in just some massive news for the Oklahoma Sooners as Jim Nagy, the former director of the Senior Bowl, making the move to Norman, Oklahoma, taking over the general manager position heading into 2025. Jim Nagy. If I were to just sell the Oklahoma fans on Jim Nagy for about 20 seconds, there's just not many people in the landscape of football that have evaluated and scouted as much football than Jim Nagy has the last 2 decades. But I want to focus more on the general manager position. This to me is quickly becoming one of the most important roles for a college football program that you see. All the best programs in the country have really good general managers. That's a trend that we are starting to see now. Why is the general manager position becoming so important in the college football landscape? These guys are getting paid a ton of money, and rightfully so. It's a massive, massive role that you have to get right if you're a college football program. It starts with how difficult it has become to put together a really good roster in the landscape of college football, where not only are you recruiting the high school ranks, that's been something we've been doing for decades, but now you have NIL and how you budget that. Then you have the transfer portal and how you scout and evaluate out of that, and then how you kind of retain your talent as well. There are so many moving parts to putting together a college football roster that you need a professional to come in and manage it. No longer can you rely on a coaching staff to get this roster right. You need a guy that is fundamentally overseeing how the roster is coming together. That's Jim Nagy's role that you're going to see for the next couple of years. And you look at the effect that having a good front office at the college football level can have. I know Oklahoma fans probably don't want to admit this, but look at USC. Hiring Chad Bowden away from Notre Dame to USC, we've already seen the impact that Chad Bowden has had on this USC program. You're hoping for a very, very similar impact with Jim Nagy, who has a ton of relationships across the country, not only at the college football level, but at the high school level as well. The thing that I'm most excited for with Jim Nagy here is the diamonds in the rough. This was always something that I respected the heck out of him. And when he ran the Senior Bowl, where he was tasked with, hey, how can we get the best players in all of college football to come to Mobile, Alabama, and play for a couple of weeks or a couple of days, excuse me. He always had the ability to find these Division twos or FCS guys that would come in and really shine at Senior Day. This is becoming a really important role at the college football landscape as well, not only in the high school trail, but in the transfer portal as well. There are so many good football players across the country that fly under the radar, for lack of better terms. Jim Nagy has proven time and time again that he knows how to find those kind of guys. And in this landscape of NIL, where for the top talent, it's just, hey, can you go out and pay them enough money to come to Oklahoma? That's kind of the reality of where we are right now. But for some of the smaller names, some of those names that, hey, that it's not going to be a bidding war, can you go find them and have them come be contributors? That's probably the best value that Jim Nagy is going to bring to Oklahoma. Want to get into a little bit of Jim Nagy's background, talk about what role he's going to have for Oklahoma over the next couple of years before we get into it. As always, to the Oklahoma fans, most notably, let it fly in the comment section. Would love to hear how the Oklahoma fans are feeling about this. I think it's cool because this is a big name. A lot of general managers are not, they kind of work in the shadows a little bit. Jim Nagy's not one of them. If you are a college football fan, a fan of the sport of football, you've heard of Jim Nagy, you've heard him talk. Very, very knowledgeable. It's a big name, and I think that excites me. Would love to hear from the Oklahoma fans. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. It's going to be really fun to see how Oklahoma goes about their business on the recruiting trail in this spring transfer portal window, because you're probably going to see a little bit of a fundamental change in terms of how Oklahoma wants to build this roster. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with Jim Nagy. A little bit about his background. Obviously, director of the Senior Bowl, so he's watched a lot of guys, evaluated a lot of guys, has a strong background in NFL scouting departments. And this is what excites me the most, where you look at one of the things that is becoming kind of tricky is whether you're recruiting at the high school ranks, whether you're recruiting out of the transfer portal, one of the most difficult things is, hey, how can you go watch a football player that might be playing at the FCS ranks or maybe the G5 ranks and say, hey, can we determine what guys are going to make that jump to the SEC and have success? Jim Nagy's watched a lot of football. He's scouted a lot of football. He's trying to find guys that can have success in the NFL. And so I have a lot of confidence that he can find guys from across the country that can have success also in the SEC at Oklahoma. And you look at this and say, I think you could probably find some flaws in terms of how Oklahoma has gone about their business building this roster, specifically at position groups like the offensive line, where you go back 12 months ago, their evaluations of these guys in the transfer portal, guys like Spencer Brown, they weren't good enough. And so what you're excited about with Jim Nagy is, hey, when that spring transfer portal window hits and we start seeing these offensive linemen from across the country hit the portal, can we find guys that can make the jump to the SEC and have success? I got confidence that Jim Nagy can do that. Some other roles that he's going to play is he's probably going to be a large overseer in terms of, hey, how are we going to allocate our NIL budget? What guys do we want to really push our chips into the middle of the table and fill a roster up with? These guys, it's important to hit on those guys. If you're going to dish out a lot of money for a guy at the high school ranks or in the transfer portal, they dang better well hit. And you're hoping that Jim Nagy can come in and kind of improve how Oklahoma hits on some of these transfer portal additions. What I also am intrigued with here with Jim Nagy is, what positions does he really want to prioritize in terms of how you build this roster? Where the collegiate landscape is becoming very similar to an NFL model, where you have a budget of NIL money. All right, where do we want to allocate that money in terms of position groups? I would expect that you see Jim Nagy put a lot of money towards line of scrimmage players, a position group that, especially on the offensive line, Oklahoma has struggled with, and especially in the 2024 year. Another thing that intrigues me is the relationships that he has across the country, where he's worked just about everywhere. And being the director of the Senior Bowl, you are in contact with a lot of college coaches across the country. You're probably keeping an eye on a lot of these guys since they've been in high school. He has a lot of relationships, which I think is certainly going to help. And then fundraising. The Senior Bowl has skyrocketed under the leadership of Jim Nagy. You don't see things like that skyrocket unless they are fundraised the proper way. Jim Nagy, in terms of fundraising, I think could also have a massive impact on this Oklahoma team. And so you look at it and say, how is he going to evaluate the transfer portal? How is he going to evaluate the high school ranks? How is he going to compose this Oklahoma roster? It's really exciting for Oklahoma fans. And there's not a ton of track record, right? For other general manager hires, we can look back and say, all right, how have they built their roster at their previous program? Jim Nagy's never really been in this position in terms of just overseeing a full roster. But one thing he's really good at is evaluating talent. And if you can do that at a high level, chances are you're going to put together a very talented team. And at the end of the day, the one thing that has not changed in college football is it's about the Jimmies and Joes. It's a speed, it's a height, weight, speed game. You get bigger, stronger, faster players, you are going to have success at any level of football. And that is now the goal of Jim Nagy. How can we put together the most talented roster possible for this Oklahoma program going into 2025 and over the next couple of years? And I think I got a lot of confidence that Jim Nagy can do it. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Going to be really fun, looking at how Jim Nagy goes about his business, building this roster over the next couple of months. We'll talk to y'all later. Appreciate you guys. Peace.